Hello, welcome to This Week in Politics. This week was a busy week in U.S. politics. We're going to talk about three main topics. We're going to talk about the N.F.L., what a mess that's become. And I had to use that phrase in the introduction with "Here comes the judge." For those of you that are old enough to remember Flip Wilson, he did a thing and his phrase was "Here comes the judge, here comes the judge." And we'll get into that. And for the last 3 weeks, I have been railing that for every week that we are talking about some other issue, we are not talking about tax reform. And in my opinion, tax reform needs to be done by the end of this year. Otherwise, a lot of the financial gains that have been made will be put on hold or be lost until this happens. So I'm hoping the Republicans will get tax reform done by the end of the year. And this week, they finally started talking about tax reform. But the first thing I want to talk about is the NFL. So here's what happened. Last Friday evening, President Trump chimed in. Now, last Thursday night was the first night of the NFL. And it's picking up where it left off last year, where some of the players, and this year a lot of the players, were taking a knee during the national anthem. And on Friday, President Trump jumped in and said exactly what most Americans think. It's disrespectful. They ought to be fired. It's un-American. And all of those things are true. And Trump said these things when he was at a rally in Alabama, which we're going to talk about that later. But so he says this in a rally, the crowd goes crazy, and then Sunday comes, and there was a game in England, and it was the Tennessee Titans and the Jaguars, and everybody on both teams took a knee during the national anthem. Now we're in another country, okay, in England. And then they played God Save the Queen, and everybody stood up. This just goes to prove the dumbing down of America. They're in England. England is the reason we came and opened and started the United States, because of tyranny in England. England is the country we fought against to gain our independence. And yet, there they are in England standing for God Save the Queen and taking a knee for the national anthem. Disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. So, in his speech in Alabama, President Trump calls the disruptive player, he uses the singular, he calls him a son of a bitch. Probably not good language for a president, but he echoes exactly what we think. How dare you to disrespect the flag? Hundreds of thousands of American lives have been lost to give you the right to be a jerk. When he said it, the crowd went wild. They, in Alabama, reflect exactly what the rest of us in America think. And Trump said it out loud, which was refreshing. Whether you like his language or not, it's refreshing to have a president that's going to stand up and say exactly what needs to be said. These NFL players are acting like spoiled brats. They're getting paid millions of dollars to play a game. Really? To play a game? And here's the crux of the issue. Those people who are supporting them say, well, they have a freedom of speech and they have the right to do that. I disagree. They do have the right to do that, but they don't have the right to do that in a private corporation. If the owner of the football team says, you work for me, you will do what I tell you to do on my time. Now, if you want to do it on your own time, that's fine. And if you think that's wrong, look at the military. If you are in the military, you are not allowed to espouse, to talk about, or to promote politics of any stripe. You're just not allowed to do it, and the federal government is your employer, and they're telling you that you can't. It's the same in your job. If your employer says you are not allowed to talk about XYZ, as an example, most companies say you're not allowed to talk about how much you make or ask other people. That's pretty standard stuff. You have a freedom to do things. You also have the freedom to accept the consequences. Now, and here's where the NFL goes wrong. As soon as Kaepernick did that a year ago, he should have been fired. And by the way, he's not working this year. His contract expired and nobody's going to pick him up. There's a message there for the rest of the NFL from the owners. The owners are not willing to come out and alienate their players, but they're telling them, look at what happened to Kaepernick. But where they drop the ball is they are not disciplining these guys. They are not saying, hey, I'm in charge, do it my way, or you're fired. And here's why. The politicization of taking a knee has to do with Black Lives Matter movement, among other things. 80% of all the players in the NFL are black. The owners feel like if they intervene, they will alienate 80% of their players, to which I say, so what? There's 80% more people that are willing to come in and play. That's what needs to happen. It's just like back in the 30s when the unions were big. If the company doesn't want a union and they unionize, fire them all. Lay them all off and bring in scabs. Do whatever it is you want. You own the company. You have a right to do that, just like they have a right to do it, as long as they also have a right to accept the consequences. But the owners neglected to take a stand and grow a backbone. And I'm sad to hear that. I am encouraged that the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team, the ownership has told all of the ball players, you will stand every time during the national anthem or you will be summarily fired. Good for them. Good for them. And that's the way it should be. You can play by my rules or you can go play in somebody else's sandbox. The other issue with this is, and I did a story on this, I don't remember, a week or two ago. Americans are getting tired of having everything politicized, from our speech to the weather, to our entertainment, to the movies. Everything is about politics, and we're getting sick and tired of it. And one of the last bastions was the NFL and the NBA. You could go in there and pay your hundreds of dollars per ticket, and for a couple of hours, just forget about everything and just be entertained by football or basketball, right? And by the way, just as a note for any owners that might be watching, when a regular American comes to watch your team, they are making a commitment for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. The tickets are very expensive. Your food is outrageously expensive. The souvenirs are outrageously expensive. The parking is expensive. And for each person, they are willing to spend hundreds of dollars. and you're willing to throw that away and shove it down their throat. Now, there was, again, this weekend, they did not do it on national TV, but in one of the stadiums, they had a video that they had prepared, and they played it. When everybody was in their seat, they played this 5-minute video about Black Lives Matter. Now, I'm sorry, I did not, as a person sitting in that stadium, I did not pay hundreds of dollars to come here and be indoctrinated and be subjected to politics. I'm paying hundreds of dollars because I want to watch football. I want the best football team you can put on the field, and I want to watch them go against the other team's best. If I want politics, I will turn into a political show. I will read a newspaper. I will watch YouTube. I will do a lot of things. If I'm interested in politics, I will search it out and I will find it. If you're interested in politics, turn into this show, This Week in Politics. We'll break it down for you, and we'll make it so that you get filled with politics in the United States. You can subscribe to my channel, and we'll talk about an hour every week, more or less, about what's going on. But if you don't want to do politics, all you want to do is watch football, aren't you offended? And here's what I suggest. Now, last week, the ratings on the NFL were down a minimum of 10% over last year, and some estimates are as high as 15%. And that was the first week. It hasn't even gained momentum yet. Here's what I say. If you don't turn in on your TV, that's going to affect the owners a little bit. It's going to affect the TV people a lot. It's going to affect the advertisers a lot, but it's not going to affect the owners or the players. Here's how you affect the owners and the players. Don't go to the stadium. If you want to know how much those owners make, just think about it. Let's say there's 60,000 people in a stadium, and each one of them spends $1. That's $60,000. If they spend $10, that's $600,000. If they spend $100, that's $6 million. If they spend $500, that's $600 million or $60 million per game. No, 30 million. $30 million per game, and that's just in the stadium. That's not counting the food and the beer and the drinks and the parking and the plus. They're making a ton of cash. If people stop going there, that's going to start affecting salaries. That's going to start affecting everything that the owners think is important. I think we need to, for this whole season, for the rest of the 2017 season, we as Americans need to show our displeasure and not go to the stadiums and not watch it on TV and let them know they are entertainment. They are not a necessity. I noticed starting this week, as this thing was building steam, there's a new thing going around where people are taking videos of them burning all of their N.F.L. memorabilia. And I used to be one of those avid guys, not for football, but for baseball, where, you'd have a hat and a jersey and ticket stubs and pictures and baseball. I used to have all that. And these guys for football have the same thing. And they're taking it all and burning it and videotaping it, and it's going viral. I mean, for those of you that are rabid fans, you know what I'm talking about. Can you imagine taking all of your stuff out that you've collected over the years and spent thousands of dollars on and burning it? What is that telling the owners? I hope the owners are getting it. What's that telling them? That's telling them, we don't want you, we don't need you under these circumstances. we'll go find another form of entertainment. And right now, baseball is where it's at. I'm not advocating one over the other. As far as I know, they're not doing it in hockey either. But they are doing it in the NBA. They are doing it in the N.F.L. And here's an interesting thing. What do those two sports have in common? 80% or more of all of their players are black. Not so in the National Hockey League. Not quite so in baseball. It's getting there, but not quite so in baseball. These protests are an extension of Black Lives Matter, and they are politicizing where regular Americans go to be entertained. It's wrong, it's disrespectful, and we as regular Americans need to stand up and say that's not okay, that's unacceptable. And an interesting thing, the owner of the New England Patriots, Bob Kraft, who is a friend of Donald Trump, came out and was against what President Trump said. A lot of the owners have come out and say, well, we want to show unity with our players. Okay, let's think about that. Unity for what? I mean, you can't, let's assume that we were willing to accept the politicization of the NFL. And you ask those players, what are you protesting? Why are you taking a knee? You would get 100 different answers. Some would be to support Colin Kaepernick. Some would be to support Black Lives Matter. Some would be to say and frankly, they interviewed Kaepernick. And he's not just about Black Lives Matter. He hates this country. So anybody that is supporting Kaepernick needs to go back and check out what Kaepernick stands for, what he's thinking and saying. That guy's got a screw loose. And the interesting thing is, he comes from a mixed family. One of them is black and one of them is white, and I don't remember which one. He's led a privileged life. He's led a good, nice life. And he's getting paid millions of dollars to play football up until he opened his mouth. Now nobody's going to touch him. Now, that is the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the Trump Talks NFL. Let's talk about the likely outcome of where this is going to be and can it be stopped. The only way in this projecting forward, I see in the short term more of the same. I see a steady decline in viewership of the NFL on TV. I see a continued acceleration of protests from normal Americans. And I see the NFL acknowledging finally there's an issue, but doing nothing about it because they still don't have their priorities straight. The NFL believes that this is a temporary thing and the fans will come back eventually. And they may be right. Americans have a small memory. What Americans don't have is a small memory for disrespecting our flag. And if the NFL has any doubt about that, they need to remember we just came off of 8 years of an un-American president, an unpatriotic president and administration. Americans felt un-American for 8 years. The whole world dissed on America for 8 years, and we as Americans are sick of it. That's one of the reasons Trump got elected, and the left still doesn't get that. The NFL doesn't get that. The Democrats don't get it. The independents don't get it. Nobody gets it except the people that have been stomped all over, and those are patriotic Americans. We get it. We understand exactly what the last 8 years was all about. The NFL doesn't get it yet. So short term, I see more of the same. What does it say long term? Um, that depends on what happens with the NFL. If the NFL comes out and grows a backbone and tells its players, you will stand on the field in sight of everybody and respect our flag, then we as fans will come back. We're upset, but we're also a forgiving people. We'll come back as soon as you do the right thing. If they do not do that, I see revenues continue to fall. Last week, and I didn't know that advertising with the stations was like this, but viewership fell far enough low down on the ratings that the TV stations had to refund money to the advertisers because they weren't reaching the numbers. You make those TV guys do that for the next 18 weeks, things are going to change. Now, another alternative would be for the press just to not give it any airtime. Don't show pictures of it, don't talk about it, and just let them deal with let the people in the stadium see what's going on. That's not going to happen, of course, because the press is left wing and they're all up in Black Lives Matter. So but that is an alternative. That could happen. I don't see that happening. Now, if none of those things happen and it's just allowed to free fall, I see eventually the NFL losing so much revenue that salaries will go down, salary caps will go down, revenue sharing will go down, and the weaker teams may even fold, which will hurt the NFL. And long term, if it is just allowed to continue to fester, I see the NFL going out or changing form in some way. But I see drastic changes in the offing for the NFL, from going from the #1 viewed sport to way down on the totem pole, like on a par with golf. You cannot offend your customer base week in, week out, and expect the customer base to remain the same. Now, the NFL will always have some customers, just like any business. You have your certain customers that are going to come to you no matter what. But that's not where the profit is made. I've been in business. Those core customers pay the bills, but that's not where the profit is made. The profit is made on the ones you get over and above your core customers. And I have no way to back this up, but to give you an example, my guess is in that $60,000 or 60,000 people stadium I was talking about, probably 30,000 of them are core fans. And those 30,000, week in and week out, pay the salaries, pay the rent, pay the utilities, pay all of that. The other 30,000 people that are in the stands are the ones that are making profit. That's the way it normally works. So as long as they can keep the stadiums half filled, they will at least pay the bills. It's when they get down to half, that's when stuff is going to get real and get on a weekly basis. That's when stuff's going to get real. And that's when the NFL will have to do something, or they will have to acknowledge the fact that the NFL is not going to be what it was. This be stopped? Yes. It can be stopped right now by Roger Goodell coming out and saying this is unacceptable. We will show respect to our flags, or to our flag and to our country, by everybody standing up on the field in plain sight of the cameras every week, or you will be fired. If he comes out and says that and they enforce it, this will be over tomorrow. let's wait and see. The next story I want to talk about, and I referred this in the synopsis, and I called it "Here Come the Judge." Now, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I have been telling you about the special election going on down in Alabama. Jeff Sessions was appointed by Trump to his administration, and Sessions was in the Senate. So they had a special election to fill that seat. And the way it's done in Alabama, they had a bunch of people running, and if nobody gets 50%, the top two have a runoff. Now, Alabama is a strong Republican state. Okay, so whoever gets the Republican nominee is probably going to be the next senator. And I have been endorsing Judge Roy Bean down there, or Judge Roy Moore, I'm sorry. I've been promoting him and asking you to vote for him for many reasons. He was running against a guy by the name of Strange, is his last name. And if you hadn't watched any of my other programs, I'll give you a little background here. Strange used to be the Attorney General in Alabama. He was investigating the governor down there and was bringing charges against the governor for corruption. While this was going on, Jeff Sessions gets promoted and the Senate seat comes open. The governor appoints Strange to the Senate seat. And all of a sudden, the charges disappear. The Attorney General gets the Senate seat and the governor gets to keep his office. They're both crooked as the day is long. Strange, while he was in there, is a pro-establishment Republican. He is a rhino. He is not pro-Trump agenda. We know this. Now let's talk about Judge Roy Moore. Judge Roy Moore was a judge. He was elected to the state Supreme Court down there, Chief Justice, and was ordered by the district court to remove the 10 Commandments monument that they had on public grounds. He refused. They removed him from his seat. Next time around, he ran again. He won again. This time, the district court, Democrats, by the way, told him he had to about gay marriages. Judge Roy Moore comes out and tells everybody, all of the judges and people that perform marriages, you do not have to comply with that. That may be the ruling from the Supreme Court, but that's illegal. They can't make you do that. Don't. The federal judgeship again removed him from his seat for not complying with an order from the Supreme Court. So he is removed a second time from the courts in Alabama. Now he wants to run for the Senate to get in there and make a difference and do the right thing. From my standpoint, and the reason that I backed him is he is a man who is willing and has lost his job, lost his income, lost his position twice to do what was right, to do the right thing. And we need that. I have been saying for years, Republicans win when we stand for ideas and ideals. When we do what is right, we win. When we try to play politics like the left does, by lying and cheating and following polls and doing the popular thing and blaming other people and divisive politics, when we do all of that, we lose. We're just another swamp rat, which is what Strange is. He's a swamp rat. Strange was backed by Mitch McConnell, who was also a swamp rat. Now, the interesting part of this whole race was Donald Trump supported Strange, a swamp rat. And I theorized a couple of weeks ago of why that happened, because politically, Trump would never back Strange. But Mitch McConnell jumped on to get Strange first, and then he got Trump. And I theorized at the time, I think Trump made a deal with Mitch McConnell. I'll back your boy down there, but you do whatever it is you have to do to get my agenda through. No more pussyfooting. So he did it publicly. And last Friday, he went down there and held one of his big rallies down there in support of Strange, which was interesting because they interviewed one of the political big shots down there in Alabama on Monday. And he said, yeah, Trump had it was a huge rally and everybody loved it. He said, but if you walk through the crowd, 80% of the people down there were supporting Judge Roy Moore. They had stickers and bumper stickers and everything. They were there to see Trump, not to do what Trump said. I think Trump counted on that. I think he made a deal with Mitch. Mitch lost. Trump wins. Moore wins. We win. And as I said before, this is a 2-vote switch. You know, let's say that the Senate, there was 5 votes each, okay? And for the rhinos and the Tea Party, if we get rid of Strange and we add Moore, now we have 4 here and 6 here. That's a 2-vote switch. That could be huge in getting Trump's agenda through. Now, it's great. We won. The string of wins continues. The special elections, this is number 8 or 9. The Democrats have won none. The rhinos have won none. The Tea Party or the Republicans have run the table all the way through, and easily, by the way. And the left still doesn't understand. They still don't get it. The day that they had the election, which I believe was Tuesday, and he was declared the winner, that day, Senator Bob Corker from Tennessee announced he's not going to run for re-election to the Senate. And I have relatives that live in Tennessee, and they say he's going to run for governor down there. I don't know. I don't care. But Bob Corker was not in step with Trump. And again, it had nothing to do with politics. It had to do with personal issues because Trump refused to appoint him. But here's the interesting part, and here's the part that the rhinos are listening to and hearing in the Senate, and nobody's saying it out loud. In Washington, when you achieve senator or House membership, you stay until you die or retire because of the power and the perks. There's an unusually high number of Republicans that are not seeking re-election, and they are all rhinos. I find that extremely interesting. The Republicans are reading the writing on the wall. The Democrats are still clueless. And I'll tell you 3 more rhinos that the Tea Party needs to go after. Well, 4 more. John McCain, I don't think he's going to be alive next time around. But McCain's got to go, and they got to put a Tea Party person in that spot in Arizona. Also from the same state, Senator Flake from out there, he's got to go. He's a rhino. He's anti-Trump, and he has caused problems. He claims to be a conservative Republican, but he's anti the wall. He's anti anything Trump wants. Murkowski from Alaska. Alaska is a strong Republican state, and she is a Republican. However, she played the same game that the governor up there played this last election. He is a native Alaskan from up there, and he's liberal. But he ran as a Republican, and he dodged the issues enough to be elected because he was Republican. Murkowski did the same thing. We as a Tea Party need to go up there and take that on head on. First, we need to get a Tea Party elected. And frankly, I see no reason at all why Sarah Palin should not be have that seat. I would love that, and she would win hands down. It wouldn't even be a contest. But I think Alaska that's an easy one we can win. Now the one that we're not going to be able to get is the one up in Maine, and I can't remember the lady's name up there. But Maine is a liberal state. We ought to just be happy that there is a Republican, even though she's a liberal. Just be happy it is a Republican seat, because she might step in for some issues for the Republicans. But on Obamacare, she's worthless. On the fence or the wall, she's worthless. On social issues, she's worthless. But there might be some issues that we can rely that aren't going to be too controversial that she'll be able to step into. But that is really the crux and the consequence of Judge Roy Moore winning. It is about the seat, but it's not only about the seat. It's about showing the country and the Republicans and the Democrats that are paying attention. This is why Trump won. We're mad as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore. We tried the liberals, we tried the left. That did not work. Let's try the Tea Party, let's try the conservatives, and let's see what happens. Over and over that the Republican and Democratic Party, as I have known them, are dead. Now the two parties we have is the establishment and the Tea Party. The establishment is liberal, left-wing, the old Republican and or Democrats. We called them rhinos, Democrats and rhinos. That's the establishment. The Tea Party is the Republican Party. Conservative values, conservative outlooks, patriotic, nationalistic, America first. Let's make America great again. That's Tea Party. That's what we want. That's what America wants. And that's what the left is never going to get, because they're America last. So Judge Roy Moore wins down there. That's awesome. That's another one for the good guys. It's a 2-vote swing, and it puts all the rhinos on. So that one vote for you guys down in Alabama was a great call. Nice job. Strange and the establishment went down there and spent somewhere between $12 and $15 million for that Senate seat. And Judge Roy Moore spent around $1 million. So they outspent 15 million. And not only did they spend money, they moved staff down there. They motivated the get out the vote, which fell flat on its face, by the way. But they outspent him 15 to 1, and they out everything him. And I hope he remembers that the establishment was against him that strong. When he goes up there, I hope he remembers that. And he still won. That shows the strength and the will of the American people of how much we want conservative values. So you guys out in Alabama, you did a good job. Good for you. We cannot let up. When the general election comes around, and I'm going to predict this right now, the establishment, it may not be obvious, but I'll bet when the election comes around, the establishment, which means the rhinos, are going to funnel money down there to try to defeat him. And they would rather have a Democrat in there than somebody that's pro-Trump. I promise you, that's the state. That's what I mean when I say the Republicans, as we know them, is dead. You know, the Republicans used to be the party that conservative, liberal, right or left, if you were Republican, we coalesced around a knee and we did whatever we had to do for the Republican to win. It's not like that anymore. See, down there we have a Republican that won, but he's conservative. He's not part of the establishment. So the Republican establishment feels no affinity towards him. They would rather have a Democrat, a liberal Democrat, than a Republican. That's what I mean when I say the Republican Party is dead. And the proof will be in the pudding when the general election comes around. And again, that they will outspend that Republican 10 to 15 to 1 to try to defeat him. Now, fortunately for us, Judge Roy Moore is a legend down there in Alabama, and again, the liberals don't get it, the establishment doesn't get it. It will probably do no good, but that's not going to keep them from trying, because all they need is one victory. There has been 7 or 8 special elections. The Republicans and the conservatives have run the table. The Democrats haven't won one, and they have thrown everything but the kitchen sink at us, and they have not been able to win one, not even close. That's not going to keep them from trying. Now, the last issue I want to talk about is tax reform. The economic numbers in our country have been absolutely phenomenal since Trump came into office. And the interesting thing is, no legislation has been passed. He has done this strictly from executive order and from the bully pulpit. When Trump was running, he said, we want to make our GNP grow at an annual rate of 3%. All the financial experts said that was impossible. We were running around 1%, 1.2 or 3% was a good quarter, okay? Trump has been in office 8 months, has not got tax reform done, and the number was recently upgraded from last quarter from 3% to 3.1% growth. And we haven't even got tax reform done. The stock market didn't, and I don't have the exact numbers, but from memory, when Obama was in office, hovered around 1900, and it was still a slow bull market, but it was stuttering. It was just very, very slow. Today, as we talk, it's around 2300. That's phenomenal growth in the stock market. Again, through executive order and through the bully pulpit. It's great. Unemployment is down, drastically down. New jobs created, unbelievably up. Every financial indication that we can see is going up, 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 up. And yet we've had no legislation, we've had no tax reform. It's all because Trump is talking about tax reform and using the bully pulpit to encourage these things to happen. And good for him. It's good to have a president there that actually gives a crud about American business. And American business is responding. But here's the one thing that can and will kill it. If we put tax reform up for a vote and it does not pass, just like Obamacare, business will hyperventilate. They will take a pause. They won't cut back immediately, but they will stop growth because they're going to decide, just like I would. You promised lower taxes. You promised certain things, and now you can't deliver. We made decisions based on that. And if you can't deliver, we're going to have to go back and do the way things were. So I can see that if December comes and there's no tax reform in place, the growth that we have experienced will go back. And Trump will get the blame, even though it's not his fault. The press will see that it's his fault. That's why this vote on Judge Roy Moore, that's why that vote was critical. So we have to get tax reform, and we have to get it done this year, and it has to pass. And that's why I think Trump made that deal with Mitch McConnell. I do believe that it will get through. And I do believe Mitch McConnell will actually make an effort to get it passed. Effort or not, I don't know. I think it just depends on how much pull or how much of a swamp rat he is. Most establishment Democrats and rhinos, their word means nothing most of the time. So who knows? I think Trump was trying something to see if it works, and we'll see. But the one thing that cannot happen is we cannot put together, and I'm going to tell you about the tax reform as it's been presented. They cannot bring this up, bring it to a vote, and it fail. If that happens, that is the worst thing that could possibly happen. So in this tax reform bill that has been presented, here's some of the provisions as I understand it. The current tax form has 7 brackets, which I was unaware of. The last tax reform that happened under Reagan, there was 3 tax brackets. So somehow between the end of Reagan and the end of Obama, they've added 4 new tax brackets. I had no idea. But anyway, they're going to get rid of those 4 they added and go back to the 3 tax brackets. And I think that the upper one is going to go from 50 to 35%, I believe. The second one, deductions that are going to be kept are the family deduction is going to be doubled. The charitable contributions is going to be kept in, and the monthly or the mortgage interest rate is going to be kept. Those 3 deductions will be kept in. Now, I don't think this is going to pass, but I think this is perfect. One of the things that Trump made sure was in this bill was we currently, for those that itemize their bill, we can deduct state and local taxes. They are going to eliminate that in this proposal. Now, why is that a bad thing? Well, for Democratic states like California, New York, a lot of the eastern states, Washington, Oregon, for those states, they have high taxes. And so when you can deduct that, the government, in effect, was paying 30% of that. So if you eliminate that, that's going to be a hardship on Democratic states, which I say good. You know, if you look at the strongest economies statewide throughout the country, the ones that are run by Republicans are the strongest. The strongest growth, the biggest business, and the brightest outlook. And look at the ones that are having troubles. California, Illinois, New York, the East Coast states. It's all because tax and spend liberal Democrats. They've gotten away with it up to this point because they could deduct it off of their income tax, and Uncle Sam would reimburse them around 30% of that. Trump wants to get rid of that, and I agree with him, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Democrats will raise too much hell. But here's the good part about it. I think it would be a good negotiating point to pull some of the Democrats over to their side. Could very easily make the case, okay, we'll eliminate that, but we're going to need some votes here. You know, pick me out 3 or 4 Democrats that are going to vote for this and guarantee they come over, and we'll eliminate it. I see that as a good negotiating tool. I think it was a good idea. I don't think it'll pass. I wish it would, but I just don't see that happen. Now, this one I was a little disappointed in. I mean, it's still a good thing. Don't get me wrong. But the new plan reduces the corporate rate tax rate from 35% to 20%. Now, if you look around the world, 35% for corporate taxes is outlandishly high. And that's why, I mean, I did some shows a couple of years ago about major corporations move their headquarters overseas to dodge a 35% tax. Well, if you're a multi-billion-dollar company and you can stay here and get charged 35%, or move your headquarters to north of the border in Canada and pay 23%, doesn't that make sense? I mean, 12% of $1 billion is a lot of dang money. Okay. And year after year, we corporate tax rates in the world. Most of the countries in the world charge between somewhere between 17 and 18 and 24 or 25%. That's where most of the countries fall. Trump wanted to take it from 35 to 15. That would have made us one of the cheapest in the world. And the reason he wanted to do that is just like selling burgers. The cheaper your price, the more you'll sell. So the cheaper your tax rate, the more companies you'll have come to the United States. Makes perfect sense. The bill that has been announced reduces the rate from 35 to 20%. It makes us competitive, but it doesn't make us the envy of the world. It just makes us an also-ran, basically. But it still lowers the rate. It reduces the motivation for most companies to leave, and it gives a little bit of incentive for those that would like to come back but don't want to have to pay all that money. So I think that's going to be negotiable. But if 20% is firm and they don't negotiate that away, I think that'll still make a huge incentive. Now, most itemized deductions were gotten rid of. I think this is awesome. I described the people that put this together. Described the goal that they wanted to have was that everybody could do their own taxes on a piece of paper the size of a postcard. What was your gross? How much did you deduct? Here's your blank deductions. Here's what you owe. I think that's perfect. I mean, think of now, if I'm tax preparation forms company, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, but if my business is preparing taxes, I'm kind of worried about this. Or if I'm a CPA and a majority of my business for 3 months a year is preparing taxes, I'm worried. But me as an American, as an individual, I have paid every year for a lot of years to have somebody do my taxes. That's several $100s I could put in my pocket by filling out a few lines and making it easy. I like that. And frankly, if we do that, that'll be step one to getting rid of the IRS. If it's all done on a postcard and there's no deductions, there's no hanky-panky, there's no loopholes, what do we need the IRS for? We don't. You might have to farm out to the private sector collections for people that don't file, but we don't need the IRS. There'll be no more forms to fill out, no more double checking anything, no more going out to negotiating, none of that. We won't need any of that. Fill in the numbers, write a check, done. Easy peasy. I like it. I think it's awesome. The property tax deduction. I've heard two different stories on this. I'm going to reserve judgment on this one until I get the firm story. Half of the people that I've heard say it's gone. Half of the people say that it's still in. I believe it's still in. The one that I heard, I listened to Rush Limbaugh one day last week, and they said he got he had an interview with one of the people that put this together, and he assured him that the property tax deduction was still in there. And I support that, and here's why. Well, people make decisions based on current law. If you're going to get rid of the property tax deduction, you need to make it effective as of a certain date, so that all of those people that bought a home counting on using that as a deduction, that's unfair to them. So you need to make it effective as a certain date, and everybody else is grandfathered in. When they sell their house, that goes away. So you will eventually have that law come in, but to make it so that nobody gets it immediately is really unfair to everybody that that owns a home. Now here's the one that I am really, really happy to see gone: the alternative minimum tax. This was originally done to make sure that huge corporations were not using the system to pay no taxes. And the government said, even if you're able to do that, you still have to pay the minimum tax. And here it is. Why am I glad to see that gone? That would be like playing a baseball game and saying, no matter how good your team is, no matter how many runs you score, you're only going to win by 1 run. But think about that. If you own a corporation or a company, big or small, and you're smart enough to figure out how to use their system against them so that you don't have to pay any money, good for you. I think that's right. They created the rules. They created the system. And if I can use that system so that I don't have to pay you money, good for me. It's not fair to set up the rules so that some people can use it and then say, well, no matter how good you are, you're still going to pay X amount of dollars. That's silly. That's the federal government trying to have their cake and eat it too. And I disagree with that. That is the tax reform as it's been presented in the first week. Now, I think there are going to be some discussions going on here. I think tax reform will pass the House relatively easy. I think the fight will be in the Senate. I think the votes are there. And frankly, I see some of the rhinos voting against it. Again, I see Murkowski voting against it. I see McCain voting against it. And I see that the liberal up in Maine voting against it. Flake might actually join this one. So if 3 votes go down, it loses. However, I do think there are some Democratic votes out there that would love to be able to go back to their people and say, we voted for tax reform to lower your taxes. Trump needs to use the bully pulpit to go to search out these Democrats and twist their arm to make sure he gets their vote. If he works it, if Trump is willing to work it for the next 3 months, to work the phones, to set up a war room, to go after the Democrats, to go out on the stump, to use his capital with the American people, if he's willing to do those things and invest his political capital, this will pass. It will pass easily. If he tries to do it like he tried to get Obamacare repealed, it will fail. I think it's that close. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. This should pass easily. If there was any other Republican in office or Democrat, if it was anybody else but Trump, this would pass easily with very little effort. But because it's Trump and he represents the Tea Party and he's not part of the establishment doesn't give two damns about what the American people want. They don't give two damns about anything except their power and their position. They would rather have a Democrat elected in a seat than a Republican. They would rather have an establishment elected than a Tea Party. They would rather have no tax reform and blame Trump than have tax reform and make the American people happy. It's sad, but it's true. And that is exactly the battle that's going to be going on. I hope Donald Trump learned from his last lesson and understands that this is not about Republican and Democrat. This is about establishment versus Tea Party. This issue, however, will go across party lines, and some of the conservative Democrats that are from the South, he might be able to pull some of those in, or even some from the Midwest. It remains to be seen. The debate that's going to go on over the next few weeks will be intense. The Democrats are going to hit this hard. The press is going to make it, they're going to pick out what they consider to be the weak part. And they will just harp on that all the way through, trying to hang a bad issue around the neck. And I don't know for sure, but my guess is the property tax. Well, no, I think the issue there, the press is going to hit on, is they're going to try to claim that this is a tax break for the rich, and at the expense of the states. That'll probably be the establishment battle cry, because that's what they say about any time taxes are done. I think they'll drag Bernie out, have him go speak about it. And I think the press will harp on that day in and day out until the vote is cast. Trump is going to need to counter that. He's going to need to send his surrogates out. He's going to need to battle this. He needs to hold rallies consistently. He needs to invest political capital, and he needs to do it quickly. He needs to do it consistently. And as it builds, just like he did in the general election, the day all the way up to the day the vote is done, he needs to be out pushing it. If that happens, I see a good chance of this passing. I just hope and pray he doesn't try to treat it like he did getting rid of Obamacare. That was a nightmare. Now we're coming to a part of the program that I call current events. And what I do here is I pull current events out and we chronicleize them, and we try to put them in the same of that week, in the same week that we're talking about politics, because a lot of times, especially revisionist history writers, try to, or don't try to, but do get their times and facts confused. So if we put them down digitally, we can always go back to any certain week and find the issues that was going on. Now, there are three here that I want to talk about. Hang on a minute. Okay, here's one that says Alabama vote boosts GOP primary challengers. Now, this goes back to the story we were talking about Judge Roy Moore. I have been saying all along, the Tea Party needs to get invested in primary challenges to these rhinos. You know, so just like in Alabama, we know that a Republican is going to win that. We're 99% sure a Republican will win that state Senate seat. The fight will be won or lost in the primary. And the rhinos and the establishment recognize that. That's why they put 12 to 15 million dollars in that race to try to defeat Judge Roy Moore. It failed. As it stands right now, Roy Moore will win the Republican seat in Alabama. The lesson that the Tea Party needs to learn is that is the same model we need to do if they don't do any other ones. They need to get Murkowski in Alaska. They need to get Flake in Arizona. If they get those two, if we can get just those two seats, we can run the table. But there are many rhinos out there that we can get rid of if the Tea Party will go out and find good candidates, get behind them. The American people, especially in the red states, you know, the blue state up in Maine, I mean, yeah, it's Republican, but it's really, Maine has always been a liberal state. You're not going to touch that one. Another example would be Chris Christie. He is a Republican, but the whole state is blue. He got there he's a rhino. That's why he didn't do anything in the general presidential election. Everybody knows he's a rhino. The American people are ready, especially in the red states, to get rid of the rhinos and make sure that Trump's agenda gets pushed. And this newspaper article was written the day after Judge Roy Moore won, and it just proves what I've been saying all along. We need to use this as a cookie cutter method. This is how the elections need to be run, the congressional and senatorial elections coming up in 2018. So it says, who really lost Alabama? Well, the interesting thing about this article is it says the GOP's Obamacare failure helps to elect Roy Moore to Alabama. That's not really true, but it proves the point. Americans are sick and tired of electing people that say they're going to do something and get up there and don't do it. For 7 years, the Republicans repealed Obamacare overwhelmingly because they knew it wasn't going to matter. Now that it matters, we can't muster 51 votes. They're sick of it. So what did they do? They elected the Tea Party. And again, this says exactly what the American people are thinking. I am sick and tired of electing rhinos to go up there and not do what we elected them to do. Now, this one was just a little article, but I found this extremely interesting. And the title of it is James Madison Weeps. Freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government, wrote Ben Franklin. When this support is taken away, the constitution of free society is dissolved. Imagine what Franklin, James Madison, and the other founders would make of a new Brookings Institute survey showing that American college students have no clue what the First Amendment means. It's unbelievable to me. You know, when we talk about, you all seen the stories. Somebody goes to a college campus to speak, Ann Coulter went, and riots break out, violence happens. She had to cancel her speech, and it happens over and over and over. And every time it happens, it is conservative Republicans that are doing the talking. It's never the liberals. And I have told my kids over and over and over. Colleges are populated by ultra-liberal left-wing professors. They see it as their job not to educate you, but to indoctrinate you. They want you to believe that if you are a Christian, if you are a Republican, if you espouse any of those, you are a bad person, you are wrong, you are uneducated, you are stupid, you need to be a liberal and a left-winger. Now, I know this because that happened to me. The first presidential candidate I supported was Jimmy Carter, and I went out and campaigned for him. because I had been indoctrinated. When I saw what a failure he was, and I saw the alternative, Reagan changed a lot of people and a lot of political views, and they got trounced on by Obama. But once Americans remembered what it's like being under a liberal left-winger, that's why Trump won. Now listen to this. This guy surveyed, let's see, more than 1,500 undergraduates, and among the alarming findings are this. Most American college students do not know that even hate speech is constitutionally protected. Half agree. Now listen to this. Half of the college students agree that it's okay to shout down a speaker whose views they don't agree with. 1 in 5 believe, that's 20%, believe it is acceptable for a student group opposed to a speaker to use violence to keep him from speaking. Wow. So on American college campuses today, half think it's okay to shout down a speaker that you disagree with. How is that remotely okay? Why is that promoted as being permissible? I don't understand that. Just because you don't like what somebody's saying, get up and move. Don't go. Turn the channel. It is not okay to do that. And I just said in a program, I think it was last week, and I said, at what point is it okay? Did it become okay for somebody to be concerned about my freedom of speech? My freedom of speech is protected by the Constitution, and I reserve the right to offend anybody I choose to offend. If you don't like it, turn the channel. If you don't like it, don't come to when I speak. If you don't like it, don't listen. That's your right. Your right does not trump my right, no pun intended. I have the right to offend anybody I choose to offend. And I was talking about that because of what Zuckerberg and Soros and Bezos are all doing, trying to control speech on Facebook and Google and YouTube. They're farming it out to these left-wing organizations, and they have the power to come in there and do certain things to a website. Now, let me give you an example. I am a right-winger. I am a Christian. I am an evangelical. I am a Republican. Who do you think, if I just talk about Christianity, if that's all I talked about, who's going to be offended? I will offend somebody. Who am I going to offend? Everybody that's not Christian. All the left-wingers. To them, what I say is hate speech. I have had my programs deleted. I've had my web page not have access to it for a day, just because these left-wing companies deem what I say is inappropriate. Who died and left them in charge of the speech police? That is inappropriate. And yet, here we see, can you see that? James Madison weeps. Half of our college kids think it's okay to yell down somebody if you don't like what they say. Has everybody lost their mind? Has manners gone out the door? If you don't like what somebody is saying, it is rude. It is unacceptable to do that. If you don't like it, get up and leave. It's just like we were talking about in the first story when we were talking about the stadiums or watching a TV. Don't watch it. Don't spend your money on it. Don't go to the stadiums and don't watch the TV. It is not okay to yell down somebody on stage just because you don't like what they're saying. That is inappropriate. That is not what free speech is about. This guy's conclusion is blunt. Freedom of expression, he says, is deeply imperiled on U.S. campuses. We take that further. Given that a functioning democracy rests on free expression, we are not a democracy, we are a republic, by the way. What do these results say about America's future when these students leave school and begin to take their places in public life? No kidding. No kidding. It's easy to mock the students for their ignorance. Responsible for teaching them. There we go. They're finally getting to the issue. These results suggest that the failures of our education system are beginning to have terrible consequences for Americans' life. No kidding. We conservatives have been yelling and screaming about the dumbing down of our youth for decades. And now it's happened. Our college students that are soon going to be functioning adults in our society have no clue what the First Amendment says or means and don't care. What they think about is what they want, what they think. The difference between a right and a privilege. The left, whenever they want to get something, they call it a right. Let me give you an example. A woman's right to decide about abortion. That is not a right. That is not in the Constitution. A right is something that is given by God, not by man. A woman has no right to take another life. And yet, whenever the left talks about abortion, they always use a woman's right. There is no right. And I understand that. Age understand that. The college students, the millennials, don't understand that. They can't differentiate between a right and a privilege. If they don't understand how to find that, to understand that, the Constitution means nothing. And that's what the left has been after for decades. And it is finally here. Now, I don't know what's going to happen next week. I'm going to wrap this up. I have a big story here, but I'm going to wait for next week. But I will tell you that at the end of this week, at the end of this last week, the FBI broke a story that they have been investigating college sports and about corruption. And Rick Paterno got fired, and his associate got fired. We still don't know all the details. We know Adidas is involved. We know some financial planners are involved, and we know the coaching staffs on a lot of teams are involved. The details will be trickled out, I'm sure. And I'm glad to see it happen. But here's my question. The FBI has the time, effort, energy, and money to investigate college sports, and it needs to be done. The question is, how come they don't have the time, effort, energy, and money to go after Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, Debbie What's-Her-Name Schultz, Loretta Lynch, the Clinton Foundation Pay for Play, James Comey? Why aren't they doing that? Their priority is more on college football. Are you kidding me? To get their priorities straight, and let's start working on making America great again. The last administration was the most corrupt administration in history. When we were in high school, Tammany Hall in New York was considered to be the biggest political corrupt system ever. The Obama and Clinton administration, it makes that look minuscule. Makes it look like small potatoes. They are the most corrupt, the most vile, the most evil administration ever perpetrated on the American people, and the FBI cannot be bothered with investigating it. Somebody needs to get their priorities straight. So next week, I'm guessing the big story will be tax reform and the FBI investigation into college sports. Well, we'll see next week. That wraps up current events, and that wraps up this week in politics.